When you change the way you think about things, the things you think about begin to change. This episode is all about letting go of your fear of making mistakes because in this industry, I'm here to tell you that mistakes are inevitable. And not only are they inevitable, but they're essential to your own growth. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jade Hernandez, a camouflage tattoo artist and educator. I help beauty bosses effectively market their business and become the authority in their field, close more leads, and make more money. In the past 6 years, I've launched 2 successful beauty businesses to multiple 6 figures with over 100 5-star raving reviews and several media press spotlights. While most marketers will tell you to hustle and work harder for success, I'll show you how to create more value from the inside out so that you work less, make more, and truly expand and transform your business and life. This is the Beauty Expanded podcast. Welcome back. I am in the process of gaining back my voice. I'd say it's 90% there. So if I sound a little off too, it's because last week I finished up a training and I started losing my voice. This used to happen to me often a few years ago, and it's actually been quite some time since it's happened again. But it was always an indicator of when I was a bit overworked. And I would say that probably holds true as to why my voice is kind of eluding me, just because we've had some really long sessions in the studio, plus we had a training and a few other things that I'm working on the back end, such as the mastermind that we are hosting and getting set up for our next year's official launch. I wanted to hop on here and really talk about mistakes because this is something I see a lot with my own students, and I can definitely relate to feeling the same way early in my career. And maybe this rings true for you. This episode is going to be perfect for you if you find yourself trying really hard to prevent mistakes from happening in your business. So what this may look like is you find yourself having a lot of anxiety, feeling burdened by creating perfect results and simply just not messing up, which is actually sucking the joy out of what you do. You know you're afraid, and I would say even drained by the thought of making mistakes when you find yourself not even being able to be fully present and in the moment with your clients in sessions. Even so much so that when things do go well, it's hard for you to even acknowledge it and then simply find joy in it and even find yourself proud of how far you've come and what you've accomplished. Things just probably seem a little flat, and it's because this overwhelming anxiety and fear of making mistakes overshadows everything else that you do. Or maybe you haven't really started your business and you haven't taken the full leap and putting yourself out there and getting clients because you're so afraid of making a mistake. And because of that fear, it's actually limiting and blocking you from attracting clients and working on them. And I'm here to tell you that experience is the only true form of knowledge. And knowledge comes from doing. And the action of doing isn't always a perfect line. If anything, some of the greatest lessons that I've learned, not only in my personal life, but definitely in my professional life, have been from making mistakes. For example, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was early in my career when I chose the wrong color and I simply went too deep on a darker skinned client. I've done a podcast episode about that experience because it was one of the biggest mistakes in my career. And I remember everyone had told me never to work on people who hyperpigment and to not work on dark skin clients because of hyperpigmentation. And I did. And then here I have this big mistake and have permanently, altered her body in a negative way. And because of that mistake, it propelled me into the discipline and the motivation to figure out a solution so that it wouldn't happen again. And now when I look at my portfolio, I would say I have one of the most vast portfolios of skin tones because I feel a lot more confident working with darker complexions, Fitzpatrick 5s and 6, because of that one mistake. And because of that one mistake, I could have easily closed up shop, quit, and been stuck in my fear and never worked on darker skin clients. But I'm so glad I didn't let that take over me. I'm so glad that I didn't let that stop me. I was definitely accountable and responsible and to try to make things as right as possible. But part of that experience and that journey is what led me to figure it out. I literally remember thinking, okay, I know it sounds funny, but I really thought about Elon Musk and Tesla. And I was like, I can only imagine how many people probably told him no as well. And I was just determined that I was going to find a solution and that I was going to make it possible and figure out a way to work on darker skinned clients when it came to camouflage tattooing. And not only that, but that experience also expanded into more knowledge, more education, seeking out mentors, and really learning about hyperpigmentation as well, which is something that so many of my clients experience. And I'm not afraid of that. It can definitely extend their healing time, but I'm at a standpoint now or in a position where I can help educate them and manage their expectations and really give them beautiful results, even if it takes longer for them to heal. I can think about some of the mistakes that I've made with over trusting students in the past and being a bit too casual when it came to consent forms and NDAs and all of that stuff until I had experiences where I got burned or felt like someone copied me and reproduced some of my materials that I worked really hard in creating, which then led me to take my boundaries more seriously and to hire a legal team to draft up NDAs and non-competes. And that all came from negative experiences that I was then able to transform into a positive one. There's also instances that I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to, which is investing a couple of $1,000s into learning a new service and walking away with more questions or not feeling confident or not even feeling like it was worth the amount that you spent. And I've had students who have been trained previously from other educators on camouflage tattooing and have been really upset by the time that they train with me with the amount of time and money that they've invested in the past, or in some cases, even being trained poorly on a specific technique. And I can definitely relate to those experiences. But after every negative situation, I ask myself, what is there for me to learn from this? What can I take from this? A lot of the poor trainings that I've invested in have actually really taught me what I don't want to do, how I want to make mine different, what doesn't work, what would work. And that action, you can either look at it as it was a waste of money and time, or you can think of it as a learning lesson to what propels you to find clarity in what it is that you want to bring forth in the future and what you want to create. I think a lot of times we can get frustrated with ourselves or frustrated with the person that maybe we invested in and get stuck in that victim mentality of thinking and blaming the other person for our circumstance or our anger or a disappointment. But that's not going to empower you. That's not what's going to hold your personal power. If anything, every time you play a victim into circumstances, you're leaking your own personal power. Whereas the more empowering mindset to have is, man, that sucked. But if I can pivot my thinking, if I can take a moment to just give the space and to ponder, if everything that happens to me is for me, if everything is a blessing, even if it's a blessing in disguise, how can I make this experience for me? How can I make this better me? And that's what I take in all trainings, because the one thing about camouflage tattooing is you will need to continue your education. There is not going to be one teacher, one experience that's going to give you everything that you need. And so take it as a learning experience that is only going to continue your education, even if it shows you what you don't want to do. And I do see a lot of you guys get stuck in avoiding all action, all movement forward at whatever cost because you're so afraid of making one mistake. So the mere fact that you're trying to circumvent from having mistakes happen is actually stunting your growth and your success. Because I can tell you in the industry that we're in, mistakes are inevitable. They are going to happen, guaranteed. And instead of trying to prevent that from happening, which is only stunting your growth, I would argue to say, it's better to lean into it and to know that it is part of what we do. It is part of the game. It's what you do after that mistake has happened that determines your character, your integrity, the ethics and moral of your business, and more importantly, your movement forward. I'm not telling you that mistakes are going to happen and, oh, well, good luck to your clients. That's too bad for them. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to say, but rather saying that mistakes are going to happen. So, what do you need to do to handle that, to navigate through that, and to lean into it so that it doesn't paralyze you from doing the work that you're meant to do and serving the people that you're meant to serve? Anytime a mistake happens in my business, I always look at what can I be responsible for? How can I make this right? How can I make this better? Is there anything I can do to fix this? There has been definitely some clients that we have paid to get their tattoo removed. And with each mistake, I have become a better artist because I've learned how not to do something because it actually didn't work. This is what's taught me how to dilute inks and how much I need to dilute them so that I don't pigment load. This is why I now understand from a knowing standpoint that comes from the experience of knowing what oversaturation looks like when you do pigment load and how artificial that looks in the skin. And I'm sure a lot of you guys can look back at some of the mistakes you've made, and I can almost guarantee you've learned something about those mistakes that you no longer do in your business right now, which then affords you to be a better and more evolved artist in your line of work. Another thing I've just recently learned this year is to not rush things. When I rush things because I feel like the client's timeline is rushed or I'm not getting them results fast enough. I've talked about this with my coach, and she's like, when you Hail Mary things, and I guess that's more of a football term, but it was something that we could be able to laugh about because it was true. She's like, you have a tendency to Hail Mary things when you don't get results fast enough for your clients, when you can't even guarantee. That's not something you can guarantee for your clients ever. And yet you feel bad when you can't get them results fast enough. So maybe I did one session on a client and I was thinking I was going to be able to give them a lot more improvement. And maybe I was only able to get them 5% improvement because for whatever reason, their scar kicked out the ink. This is just an example. And so what I tend to do is on the second session, I'll Hail Mary it, which means that I'll try to overcompensate for the lack of results that I was able to create for her for the first session. And every time I Hail Mary something, it always ends up being worse, where I pigment load, or maybe I over trauma the skin. In those instances, I've learned that's a weak point for me, that I'm less intentional with my tattooing when I try and rush things. It's not something that I'm good at. And so now that I'm aware of that, I'm able to stop that from happening, because when and if I get into that frequency of rushing, there's a higher developed part of me that knows what's going on and is aware that I'm not in a position to rush things because it's most likely always going to yield poor results. And so now I'm able to stop that from happening because I've had mistakes in the past that have shown me that I have a tendency to do that. All the mistakes that we make are part of our journey to evolve and to personally grow, as well as grow our business and become better artists. Now, I'm not saying to haphazardly tattoo. You do need to be responsible and become self-aware and knowing where you're lacking in education and experience, and being responsible to learn from others who can help fill in those gaps for you. But no matter what, there are probably still going to be mistakes that are going to happen. I can almost guarantee all of us get into this industry not wanting to make mistakes. So our intentions are always good. Our intentions are always pure, but it's human nature. What we do is not an exact science. It is an art. And sometimes shit is going to happen. But what I want you to gather from this episode is that if you find yourself trying to avoid mistakes from happening, becoming a perfectionist, or not starting, like if you are trained and certified in a service and you still haven't put yourself out there and practice and jump started your business because of the overriding fear of making mistakes, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're actually self-sabotaging your own success. So what if you're listening to this right now and you're like, Jade, I agree, I get it, but it is what it is. I am still afraid of making mistakes and I just don't know how to lean into that. So what does that actually look like? So for me, when I say lean into it, is just accepting that that is part of the artist's journey. Simply accepting that, hey, I have good intentions. I'm never maliciously going to try to make a mistake. But in the case that it does happen, I know within myself that I will try and do what I can to make it right. And that is simply the best that you can do. Another thing you can do is to make more conservative choices in the colors that you choose, how you tattoo, and make safe assumptions to, again, avoid making mistakes that are costly, but also knowing that there's nothing that you can do to guarantee perfect results 100% of the time, and giving yourself the grace and time it takes to develop the experience, which then leads to the knowing and confidence in your craft. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Be confident that you'll have the tools and the heart to navigate through those mistakes so that you end up coming out ahead. And how you come out ahead of those mistakes is valuing the lessons that you learn from them. So until next time, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to connect and help you more. If you have a question you'd like for me to answer, please send it to jade@studioconceal.com. That's JAYD@studioconceal.com, and I might highlight it on my podcast. I find what's often personal is most general. So if this episode helped you, please share it with a friend who may need the encouragement and inspiration. I'll catch you on the next one.